In this part 2 of 2 video, I'll run through numbers 8 through 14 of the kinds of dishonorable speech I believe politicians commonly use. Check out the part 1 video for more information about this list. Number 8, mocking. An example from Republican House Leader McCarthy from June 8, 2021 is, in my opinion, on her way back from Mexico City, VP Kamala Harris should stop by McAllen, Texas, a border community overwhelmed by illegal immigrants, drug cartels, and COVID risks. No guarantee that the flight serves cookies of her likeness, but it's just a 2-hour plane ride. Some background information may help here. While flying on Air Force Two to Guatemala before visiting Mexico, Harris reportedly gave out cookies of her likeness that were given to her as a present. What can you do to avoid getting tricked? Recognize that mocking is typically a way to try to put someone down and prove you're better than them. If a politician wanted to prove that their ideas were better than another's, they probably would have just focused on discussing those ideas and how they were better than their opponents, rather than effectively putting their opponent down. Number 9, lying or misleading. One example I found from Speaker Pelosi from June 15, 2021 is, today Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans lined up to attack LGBTQ small businesses struggling to stay afloat during Pride Month. Once again, it's clear that no attack is too low for House GOP. I believe this tweet was misleading as indicated in my suggested more honorable version of it. Today, 177 House Republicans, 85% of those present, voted against passing the LGBTQ Business Equal Credit Enforcement and Investment Act on suspension, a procedure used to expedite passing of legislation. Therefore, to this point, the bill has not passed. So, was it really an attack by Republicans? An example from Republican House Leader McCarthy from May 20th, 2021 is, you're paying more for gas this year than last year, or any year since 2014, which was when Joe Biden was in the White House last. More pipelines and energy development are needed here in America, but Democrats have fought to reverse our energy gains. This is misleading because while it's true that the price of gas, according to EIA.gov, was higher in April 2021 than it was in the month of April back to 2014, if you average the price of gas for the first 4 months of 2021, the average price for the first 4 months of 2018 was actually higher. Note that Pelosi's tweet was misleading based on offering opinion as fact, while McCarthy's was based on offering a fact in an imprecise way that was open to interpretation. What can you do to avoid getting tricked? When you hear something that sounds like it might be a bit off, search to see if fact-checking websites such as politifact.com and factcheck.org have verified it. There are many fact-checking websites out there, and Google even has a fact-check explorer that helps you search specifically for fact-checks related to a certain topic. Number 10, making something out to be a crisis and blaming the other side for it. Recent things that have been made out to be crises include undocumented immigration, the COVID-19 pandemic, opioid abuse, racial justice issues, climate change, terrorism, and the national debt. That's not to say that these issues aren't important, it's just that calling them crises is opinion and tends to promote fear and a lack of critical thinking around them. An example from Republican House Leader McCarthy from June 27, 2021 is, President Biden says that he inherited an insecure border. That is false. Our border is facing a health, humanitarian, and national security crisis like none we have ever witnessed, and it is a direct result of the disastrous policies of President Biden and VP Harris. What can you do to avoid getting tricked? Decide for yourself if you think it's really a crisis and how it might compare in relative severity to other crises. Then try to think of some of the possible contributing factors that politicians may not be talking about, especially how circumstances and actions taken in the past could have led up to the current situation. Number 11, promoting hate and prejudice, such as against the wealthy, elites, racists, sexists, or a certain ethnic group. Keep in mind that hate of haters is still hate. An example from Republican House Leader McCarthy from June 16, 2021 is, as we emerge from the virus, elites at institutions across society are being forced to reckon with the truth. The coronavirus likely came from a lab in China. This is a truth they, along with legacy media and social media outlets, helped cover up for over a year. What can you do to avoid getting tricked? Try to become aware of when hate comes up for you while listening to or reading a politician's words. Once you become aware of your prejudices and hates and how they can affect your judgment, you may be able to reduce their influence on your decisions. Number 12, saying the other party voted against something. This can be a misleading oversimplification. Have you ever heard a politician say something like, my opponent voted against pay raises for our fine men and women in uniform no less than 10 times? That may be technically true, but the implication is that the person voted specifically against pay raises for the military when, in fact, they may have voted against certain legislation that included pay raises because it also included funding for stuff they didn't agree with. An example from Speaker Pelosi from June 15, 2021 is, today Kevin McCarthy and House Republicans lined up to attack LGBTQ small businesses struggling to stay afloat during Pride Month. Once again, it's clear that no attack is too low for House GOP. I covered this one in number 9 above on lying and misleading. Some Republicans voted against passing a bill in an expedited way, perhaps because they wanted to debate some aspects of it rather than that they were specifically against LGBTQ small businesses. What can you do to avoid getting tricked? Look up the legislation in question. Both passed and introduced legislation can be found at congress.gov. I recommend you read or skim through a piece of actual legislation at least once, if only to see how much stuff, some of it seemingly unrelated, they sometimes put together in a bill. And if you hear that someone voted against something you think is good, stop for a second and ask why they may have voted against such a thing. Could there have been other stuff in the bill that you think is bad? Their overall vote may have been for a reason you'd actually think was good. Number 13, describing a partisan bill as common sense legislation, implying that if the other party doesn't support it, they're stupid or lack common sense, or possibly worse, maybe they don't support it because they're bad people. An example from Speaker Pelosi from June 5, 2021 is, this deeply flawed ruling reverses 30-year common sense protections that keep deadly weapons off our streets and keep our communities safe. If upheld, it poses a clear and serious threat to public safety and innocent lives. House-passed gun violence prevention bills must be enacted now. What can you do to avoid being tricked? Things can seem like common sense if they're likely to give us the result we want now. Try to think of what the long-term effects might be and also what principles common sense may be going against, such as the principle of people having individual rights. Number 14, saying something like, SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, supports us in our position, or the Supreme Court confirmed we're right. The Supreme Court rules on cases based upon interpretations of executive orders, the law, and the U.S. Constitution. Some of these interpretations can be highly technical. In other words, they may rule one way or another based on a legal technicality rather than because they're saying that the losing side is somehow bad or that the winning side is good and they support the actual content of some law or executive order. An example from Speaker Pelosi from June 15, 2021 is, today our nation celebrates 9 years of the DACA initiative, which empowers hundreds of thousands of young immigrants to pursue their American dream. This week, we also mark 1 year since SCOTUS affirmed DACA and rejected the Trump administration's illegal, immoral assault on our dreamers. In the Supreme Court case in question, Chief Justice Roberts wrote in the majority opinion, "We do not decide whether DACA or its rescission are sound policies. We address only whether the Department of Homeland Security agency complied with the procedural requirement that provide a reasoned explanation for its action." What can you do to avoid getting tricked? Look up the original ruling and determine for yourself if it really supported a given position on an issue. Supreme Court rulings can be found here under Opinions, www.supremecourt.gov. Some other kinds of dishonorable speech that politicians may use in tweets may be more difficult to identify. These include distracting from a politician's mistake or wrongdoing by talking excessively about something else rather than owning up to their mistake, and also having your cake and eating it too, such as in talking up the positives of money going towards something without mentioning the possible trade-off in increased national debt and or taxes. That's my list of 14 kinds of dishonorable speech I believe politicians commonly use, as evidenced by each one of them being used in at least one tweet by McCarthy or Pelosi over a less than 6-week period on Twitter. I hope when you hear politicians say something similar to one of the entries on this list, it inspires you to stop and evaluate for yourself if they are speaking dishonorably and supporting hate over love, or using a dirty trick, if you prefer. Thank you for watching.